ZIGGURAT, a tale of swords, sorcery, demons, and Solomon. The story is read by friends and family. This is just the first part of many.
Prologue.
Legacy. This is our ancestry, a brick laid by every one of us, a monument to our genius over stone and science. This is our birthright, forever passed on, an eternal gift. Never shall we suffer the rise and fall of conquest and occupation. We are jailers to the source. We harness and wield power to match the gods. We are the mightiest of all people, past, present, and future.
We have the day.
Revelation.
In a cell, in the darkness, sits a man. There is only a chair in his cell. It is an ancient iron thing. The sole occupant is perched on the back of the chair, as still as death, perfectly balanced. His hands are pressed together, resting on his forehead, his fingers pointing out, like a beak. His robe hangs behind him and down the back of the chair, like a tail. His shape and silhouette in the gloom is that of a crow. He is still and quiet for the moment. In the door of this cell is a hatch. It is always open. Outside the door, before the hatch, is a cruder chair and a table. A man sits on the chair. There is always someone sat on this chair. It is not always the same person. There are several, and they take turns guarding this prisoner. They are the keepers. On the table is a ledger. This ledger contains the rants and ravings and ramblings of the prisoner. It is now half full. It contains over 13 years of scribblings. The keeper leans forwards and peers through the hatch again. The prisoner hasn't moved, not even a wobble. He hasn't moved for hours. The keeper sits back down, smooths out his grey robe, and settles himself for a period of quiet and waiting. He idly plays with a trinket suspended about his neck by a leather cord. The trinket is a set of carved balancing scales. The prisoner knows nothing of his past. Even his birth name had long been erased by the struggles of a troubled and turbulent mind. Now he has been given a new name by the keepers. It is Revelation.
Chapter 1. The Fair.
A bridge shall form between two worlds, a bridge that defies distance, but not time, never time. 3 shall cross this bridge, and 2 shall take this journey more than once. Look to the sorcerer, he is the key, but he is not the hand that holds the key. Look to the child, a distant child, he is the keystone. Should he hold, and all will hold. Should he fall, and all will topple.
The fair had come to the market town of Abergavenny. There had been no posters, no adverts, no warnings at all, yet on an overcast night, halfway into the month of September, it suddenly appeared. In the huge field before the town's castle, a field usually home to birthing mares, walkers, landing hang gliders, cowpats, and an endless supply of dog poo, were 6 large carts, their beasts of burden all huddled together. These horses, each as large as a monstrous crow and as black as a tar barrel, were content to crop the grass and nudge each other. They were the only things that stirred. Everything else in the immediate vicinity was silent and still. It was dark. The moon was slight, but still offered enough light to chase away all but the most stubborn of shadows. Most of these had gathered in the many copses that dotted this large meadow. In the midst of these bunch trees, the shadows within seemed to peer out and shy away, for something strange was happening within the nearest copse to the horses and their loads. Here, the silhouettes of maple, sycamore, and fir were being drawn across the ground to stretch towards the gathering of carts. Once here, the shadows broke free from their source to wrap around, smother, and further hide the field's intruders. This witchery was a sure sign, an omen, that the usual untroubled town of Abergavenny was about to play victim to a bad sort of skullduggery. Throughout the evening, the usual tea-time hikers and dog walkers moved a little faster and kept a little tighter to the path that ran around the field's edge. They didn't know why they did so. Most were unaware of their quickened pace, yet on they half walked, half trotted, eager to be back in the comfort of their own homes. 6 large horses and 6 larger carts should have been noticed by all, or at least most. Certainly some, yet no one paid any attention to this huddle, not even a glance, which was strange, for these carts and horses had been there for several hours. The calm before the storm ended when the town hall bells tolled 8 times. As the last chime died, the roof of the central cart opened, parted, and out from the middle rose a fairground organ. Set in its centre stood an array of 7 organ pipes, arranged with shorter ones at the sides and taller ones in the middle. To either side of these pipes were 2 large, crudely carved wooden puppets, each no more than a yard tall. They were man-shaped, although heavy-set, and painted and textured, to create the impression that they were made of a grey stone. Before one puppet were drums, before the other an xylophone. The arms of both puppets were clearly jointed at the shoulders, and both wore small battered crowns. Forming a border below and above the organ were painted panels. Each showed various scenes. A miniature train track ran around the base of the pipes, and an overlapping flat roof protected the whole ensemble. As the organ rose from the cart, the frontispiece lit up, and music began to play. Three very odd persons, stood and waited by this cart. One was short, one was very wide, and one was very, very tall. The 6 tethered horses, together with the local horses and foals that were standing on the outskirts of the field, suddenly ceased their chewing, swaying, and tail flicking. It seemed that even their breathing and blinking slowed. They now stood as still as statues. This cloak of stillness and slumber, carried by the ghostly haunting music, spread out further and further beyond the field, beyond the boundary, to eventually smother the whole area. Road by road, street by street, house by house, all the people slowed and then froze. The sound of 1,000 televisions was reduced to a quiet mumble by this spell. The three persons, the short, the very wide, and the very, very tall, made their way across the field and up the first of the many streets. Once here, they all gave each other a nod and set about their business. One marched, one walked, and one danced. The marcher was the wide fellow. He was squeezed into a gaudy orange and green costume. He was as wide as he was tall, and he had a big drum strapped across his rotund tum. The drum was as big and as round as he was, and this he beat with a lively rhythm. Facing directly forward and waddling like a toddler with a full nappy, he led the other two through each street. The walker was a very tall clown, dressed in white silks, upon which were patterns of red and black diamonds. He was striding along on huge stilts, making him as tall as a 2-story house. His arms were also incredibly long, spanning the width of the street. With the gait of a crane fly, he took great strides down the road, stopping at certain houses to knock on their windows. And with this knock, the faces of children, only the children, would then appear behind these windows, staring out, wide-eyed. The walker would then move off to tap on another window at another house, enticing yet more young spectators. Now came the turn and roll of the dancer. He was the shortest, and dressed as a circus ringmaster, complete with a pillar-box red coat and trailing tails. He sported a goatee with a pencil-thin moustache that hung down from his lip to his waist. An impossibly tall black hat was perched on his head. This refused to fall off, despite his supple skips, lithe leaps, and peppy pirouettes. His bright yellow trousers were cut to the knee and flared out. His boots were black, exceptionally shiny, and sported huge silver buckles, which jingled and jangled with each hop and skip. For every child, peering through every window, he would leap before it, take a bow, and cheerfully announce in a squeal of a voice,
"Come to the fair. Everything's free."
The spell continued, and like rats to a piper, the children unlocked and unlatched their doors to follow the strange trio. Those children too small or without key crawled out of windows or through cat flaps. The trio, the drummer, the tapper, and the dancer continued the procession, road by road, street by street, house by house. Some of the children wore their daytime garments, most their pyjamas. All followed the beat of the drum, and then towards the sound of the ghostly, haunting music, to the field and to the fairground organ. And though they skipped and danced as they went, they remained perfectly silent. Not one voice was heard, not one word was uttered. There was just the rustle of clothes and the pitter-patter of bare feet. 30 minutes had passed since the mysterious music was first heard, and now before the fairground organ there was a generous gathering of children, swaying and skipping. The dancing ringleader leapt on top of the organ, stamped his big buckled black boot twice, and the music promptly changed to a livelier tune. The glaze before the children's eyes partially lifted, and they started to look round at each other, bemused and befuddled, but not fearful. The music was still playing, and the sorcery was still working.
"Children,"
the ringleader screeched,
"welcome to the fair. Everything is free."
On this cue, lanterns on poles burst into light. The other 5 carts, ignored and hidden in the shadows until now, also burst into light and life. Through ingenious design, their ceilings and sides opened up and out and up, transforming into stalls and rides. From one cart a helter-skelter appeared, twisting and rising to a height and size that defied physics. The cart was too short, much too short, for a slide that was too tall, much too tall yet. From the cart it rose and turned and clicked into place. From 2 more carts, the sides and ceilings folded out this way and that way and this way, into 2 stalls were formed, each with an 8-sided ring counter and a domed umbrella-shaped roof. From the 4th cart, a large wooden disc rose on a stout pole. Once this had reached the height of a small tree, compartments opened within it. Chairs on chains flipped out and were lowered with a series of clinks and clanks to form a carousel. The sides of the cart also opened up, providing steps to each of the suspended chairs. The last cart opened and unfolded in a series of stops and starts, expanding many, many times over until it formed a large, low marquee. All 5 attractions were painted in bright, gaudy colours, mostly red, yellow and black, and stood next to all but one, in matching colours, was a creature in an equally gaudy costume. These creatures were half animal and half man, yet, despite their bestial appearance, none of the children showed any fear toward them, even when these worthies started to beckon the children to try their stall or ride. One tender, the one that oversaw the Hall of Mirrors, didn't do any beckoning. He just sat in a small booth, scowling and staring at the milling crowd. In the centre of the 5 attractions, the ringleader leapt from the top of the organ and onto the grass below. He had been busy. He had been watchful. He continued his lively dance, weaving and skipping between the children, who now started shuffling towards the attractions. Some of the children stayed by the organ, happy to watch the puppets bashing the drums and striking the xylophone, happy to listen to the music continue to spill up and out of the pipes. And then, to much surprise and accompanying oohs and ahs, 2 doors, cunningly concealed as painted panels, flipped open at the front of the organ. 2 wooden puppets then popped out along the miniature railway tracks at the base of the pipes. They first turned and bowed to each other. They turned back to face the crowd of onlooking children before starting a merry dance. The rest of Abergavenny remained in a sinister slumber.